Hello, Surviving Change guests, family, and friends. Welcome back to another episode where we take a look at what it means to repurpose your trauma. There may be some of you out there scratching your heads at this moment because how do you repurpose your trauma? How do you find something beautiful, something meaningful, something purposeful out of something that is designed to wipe you out, that is designed to totally change your trajectory in life? I don't have all of the answers to that, which is why we have with us today Miss April Bird, who coined that phrase, repurposing your trauma, in order for her to deal with something traumatic that happened in her life. Welcome to Surviving Change, April Bird.
Hello.
Hi.
Welcome.
Okay, so April, if you would just go ahead and just give us a little background information about you, because I'm sure prior to the trauma, there was something already phenomenal happening with you. So if you would share that with our Surviving Change family.
Okay, well, my name is April Bird. Nice to meet everyone. I am 35 years old, born and raised in Atlanta. I am currently a graduate student working on my master's degree in clinical mental health counseling. Before that, I was working on my bachelor's degree, completed it in psychology and human services, and my path after that would be to go and work in corporate America for 11 years, where I spent that time deciding how I was going to develop a bachelor's degree in psychology into a path towards mental health. It's something that's always been a passion of mine. I was waiting for the moment where I would find out how I was going to use that gift and how it was going to manifest in my life. So I spent my time at the lottery working and, getting to know myself and getting to know the people around me. And eventually when I began my master's degree and started in my coursework and started learning and developing and learning about mental health, I would then be afforded the opportunity to become a supervised therapist, which I am right now. And I would also be working on my internship, which I am doing now as well, with the agency that I work for.
Okay, so you said somewhere in the middle there that there was a time for you to wait, a time for you to contemplate. And for many of us who have had to have that waiting period in our lives, sometimes we become comfortable and complacent. Did you find that that was happening with you, or did you always have some sense of where you wanted to go and how you would get there?
I definitely always had a sense of where I wanted to go and what I wanted to do. I feared complacency because, it was a very comfortable job. Your job can be mundane and it can be redundant. However, you start getting into a groove of things and it starts molding your life, and you start thinking that, this is easy. I can do this every day. I can do this all the time. I know how much money I'm making. I know, the bills that I need to pay. And I would then get married. And that's when I believe comfort really hit, because it was more so me working to provide for myself and my husband and our situation at the time versus me living my own dream and making sense out of my own dreams and what I wanted to do for myself. That would change in 2010. So while I was at the job that I was at, I decided I'm going to go back to school. I'm finally going to work on this master's degree. I've taken too much time away from what it is that I know I want to do, even though I don't know how I'm going to be a therapist. I don't know the first thing about how you become a counselor or how you become, how you engage in mental health. I just knew that it was a passion of mine because given the trauma that I had already been through in my life throughout my childhood and throughout my adult life, I wanted to find a way to speak to someone or get it out of me without talking to someone that knew me, because I felt there would be a bias there. There's always, when you can talk to your friends, they're going to give you their advice, or they're going to give you what they would do in a situation. And I wanted to find somebody that could give me an objective stance, a different perspective, a different way of repurposing my trauma. And the first person in my life to ever do that for me was a therapist.
Okay.
So when I got my own therapist and when I started engaging in my own therapy, that's when I decided, how can I become this person for someone else?
Okay. Amazing that you mentioned you decided to get your own therapist. We know that in the African American community, it has been seen as being a bit taboo
Absolutely.
to go see a counselor and to go to therapy. So we'll come back to that a little later on. But in the midst of you pursuing getting back into school, something happened that for the average person would have been like, okay, I have to focus more on this situation than I can on, getting another degree and helping other people. I need to, look at myself. So would you share with our audience what happened?
Okay. In 2013, in December of 2013, I was diligently still working on my degree. I was still married at the time, and I was still working. I would I did a figure competition in 2010, and I was just really getting into the groove of life and, getting to know myself, and I had plans. I was, going to school, and I had my school schedule, I had my gym schedule, me and my husband, we had our, my husband at the time, we had our things that we would do, and so it was just a groove, a very fast-paced life that I was living. I was, very fast-paced with everything that was going on. So in December of 2013, I got very ill. I dealt with a condition in my skin, and there was a condition, the condition that I dealt with had exacerbated. It got really intense and severe, and I had a flare-up on my body that was just unbearable and painful. And this was during the Christmas time. So during Christmas time, all of our doctors, they're out. Everybody's out for the holidays. And at the time, I didn't know much about a physician on call. All I knew was I needed my doctor, and my doctor wouldn't be back in until January 2nd. So I waited until the new year came and immediately made an appointment with my dermatologist. And I noticed that once I went in and got treatment for what was going on with my skin, it was almost instant that I was sitting in the office and my chest started hurting. And so I didn't know what that came from. It was like I just swallowed and I couldn't, it just hurt for some reason. That went on for a few days, and I had kind of attributed it to the steroids that I had gotten from my dermatologist for my skin condition. And so I started to lose my voice, and I wasn't quite sure, what was going on. So I made an appointment to see my primary care physician. And when I was headed for that appointment, actually the morning of my appointment, I had a fever that skyrocketed to 103. I went to the doctor and I was tested for the flu. I didn't have the flu. So at that time, she sent me over to outpatient imaging, where I would go and have chest x-rays. I went and had chest x-rays and went home and waited for the results. I got a phone call, and my doctor told me that there were spots on my lungs that would indicate pneumonia. So I had never had pneumonia in my life. I knew that my sister had it as a child, but I didn't know that this is what this was. So there was an antibiotic that I was put on, and then I would go through that antibiotic course and take a few days off work. I was already falling apart at the mere idea of having pneumonia, because that's fatal for a lot of people.
Yes.
But at that time, I was, doing my diligence to go ahead and take my medication and just make it through this sickness and try to get back on my fast-paced life. We will fast forward about 5 to 6 days as I was into my antibiotic, and I woke up one morning and I had lymph nodes that were swollen in the back of my ears and on my neck. Really huge lesion that just was lifted. And these were painful in the back of my head, in the back of my ears. And I realized that I did have an infection, and I know that lymph nodes respond to infection by swelling. I knew this had happened back in when I was little, when I had maybe a flu or something, and it happened like one time before, So I didn't think much of it. I called my doctor, and she called in a prescription for naproxen, which would reduce the swelling, which would take care of the pain, but the swelling didn't go down. I noticed that my lymph nodes, even after I felt better, they were still lifted. The ones in the back of my ears went down, but the one on my neck continued to remain. That didn't stop me. Okay. I wasn't in pain anymore. And the antibiotic had obviously taken care of what I thought was supposed to be taken care of. So I went back to work. I went back to school. I went back to gym. I went back to living my life with this lesion on the side of my neck, not thinking anything of it until a week later when I was sick again.
Oh, wow.
So I did not have the fever that I had, but I went back to the doctor and I was tested for pneumonia again. There were no spots on my liver. My lungs. And I didn't have the flu. And so my course for my primary care physician at this point was to have a CT scan guided biopsy done of the lesion that was on my neck, just to find out if there was any infection that was honed in on that particular spot that was causing me to be sick. Well, I went and had this CT scan guided biopsy done, and the radiologist read the results, called my primary care doctor and said there was an infection and it would just go away. Well, my primary care doctor said, what type of infection? Because she's not getting well. This is the point where I just want to briefly talk about the diligence of my doctor at the time and how I did not know how integral that would be in my healing, but it was her diligence in finding what was wrong with me that started me on the path to healing eventually. Awesome. So I would then get an actual needle biopsy done. The word biopsy is connected to cancer. She knew that, and she was very sensitive about explaining it to me, just helping me understand that this is what we need to do to find out what's wrong. That's the only way we can. We have to go inside the lesion, okay? That alleviated my anxiety for the time being. And we did the needle biopsy, and we sent the specimen to the Mayo Clinic. The Mayo Clinic came back a week later and said there was no evidence of disease.
Wow.
So at this point, I am still ill. I have had a fever for, we're into the month of February now, and I have had a fever for 2 weeks.
Wow.
Every morning, I had a fever of 101 or higher. I would break my fever with Tylenol, and I'd go to work. I would go to school. I even went to the gym. And it was there where two of my gym friends looked at my neck, and they were like, you need to get that looked at. I'm like, I am. I'm waiting on test results. Like, I don't know what else to do. I can't sit in one spot. I feel fine. So I don't know how to, aside from the fever. I felt okay. When I got the call from my physician's assistant that said the Mayo Clinic said no evidence of disease, she then told me that I was at work on this Friday when she called, and she said, we're going to send your specimen to Emory Research Hospital. And if your specimen comes back no evidence of disease at that point, then we are going to send you to an infectious disease specialist, because that's when we have to start talking about HIV and things that lay dormant in your body. Yeah. She said, we're going to give you Levaquin for your fever. It should be gone within 72 hours until we can figure out what Emory says. Emory took a weekend, Saturday and Sunday, because Monday morning at 7 a.m. when I got to work, I got a call from my physician's assistant that said, your specimen came back to us with questionable results for lymphoma. Lymphoma is a blood cancer. It's a cancer of the immune system. It's a sister to leukemia. I knew this because 3 months before I was diagnosed with lymphoma, my best friend was.
Wow.
The whole time that I was waiting on my results for my ailment, she was trying to alleviate my anxiety, telling me that you don't have what I have. you're fine. You don't have this. And I said, I don't know, friend. Like, this is deep. Like, I've never been sick like this. I've never been planted to the point where I am driving to work, like, sweating out a fever to continue to do what I need to do. Obviously, I did not take that news very well. Only for a brief moment, though. Maybe a day or two.
Okay.
And that was when I was connected with an oncologist, and we began my journey with cancer.
Wow.
I was diagnosed with anaplastic large T-cell lymphoma, stage 3, in March of 2014.
So you go through this process, you're getting the results, and we hear about individuals who, because of their drive, their will, their determination, they're able to push through and overcome, sickness and disease, or at least have a better, outcome, or, longevity of life.
Definitely.
And knowing what I know already about your story, that determination, at least got you, to that point, and you're going through. But the treatment wasn't as successful immediately as, you may have wanted it to be. I mean, because for those who don't know what a figure competition is, this young lady was competing to show off just how strong and effortless she could, kind of pose her body and everything. And so that's why you continue to go to the gym. That's why you continue to go about your lifestyle, because that was you.
Absolutely.
But we start treatment, and what is that process like?
We start treatment, and everybody is, my family and I, when I say we, I speak of my family, my friends, my gym friends, my coworkers. We all mounted up, and we, went head first in what would be my cancer journey. So I took my friend who was diagnosed, and she was headed for cancer freedom at that point. She had already been sent into remission for her. We don't like that word. She had already been determined cancer free at the time that I had been diagnosed.
Now, was she stage 3 as well when she was diagnosed?
She was actually stage 4.
Oh, wow.
And her, she had lymphoma as well. She had large B-cell lymphoma.
Okay.
She had a different type.
Okay.
And so she had a different course of treatment than I did.
Okay.
And hers was, I won't say shorter. She had a shorter amount of time where she had to go through treatment,
Okay.
but the intensity of it was just about the same.
Okay. Okay.
So we are now into the month of April, where we have my oncologist, and we know where we're going to have my treatment done. We are at Piedmont Oncology Hematology, which is now MD Anderson Cancer Network. I would have my treatment, right near the home, right near my house in Fayetteville. And we started a course of treatment which is called CHOP. It's an acronym. Each letter stands for a particular medication that you're going to be getting. I would be getting treatment once every 21 days for about an hour and a half when I would go in for treatment. That would be 6 treatments. We would do that 6 times. At the time that I started my treatment, the lymph nodes around my kidney area had got swollen as well. So it constricted my ability to walk. So we could probably guesstimate, I'd say, from here to about maybe 10 or 12 steps ahead of me, I'd have to take a break.
Wow.
I would sweat. I would hyperventilate. I would get hot. And I would just have to rest until my body would let me walk again. My oncologist told me that probably around once I had my first treatment that Monday, by that Friday I'd be able to walk again. And he was right. So I'm like all about this chemo stuff in the beginning. I'm like, okay, I hear it's poison. I hear you talking, you know, but this is what they told me to do. I was very diligent about my treatment and my course of treatment, because when you get diagnosed with cancer, everybody has an answer. Everybody got an answer for cancer. They got the holistic way. They got the, you know, the non-chemo way. They got the praying way. They got the Scientology way. And I just wanted to be well.
Okay.
So I was not getting a second opinion. No, I didn't ask Cancer Treatment Centers of America. No, I did not ask Emory Winship. I went where my primary care doctor told me to go, and I was comfortable with it. As long as I was comfortable and I felt like, because I'm not a doctor. And I'm not going to, you know, profess to know how to heal myself through this. I've never had cancer. Nobody in my family ever had cancer. I was not able to see this, you know, play out in any way. I was the trailblazer for this. I had to make the story for this. I didn't have
poster
anybody.
child.
Exactly. I was the one. I was the mock example of how to handle this. So. We started treatment. We went through 1, 2, 3 treatments, doing pretty well. Around the 4th treatment, my ability to not walk again started happening. Came back. My oncologist did a scan. He did a scan at the time, and the scan, of course, came back great. Nothing's wrong. April should be able to walk. Let's keep moving. Okay, but I can't walk. It's fine. I'll do what you say, though, Doc. 5, treatment 6, which would be in July of 2014, which should have been my last chemo. That was supposed to be my last chemo. My sister made a big poster, and I took pictures, with the nurses. I'm like, I ain't gonna see y'all no more. I was so excited, but I was sick. Physically, I felt sick. I knew something wasn't right, but I went along with what was happening. I was waiting for my last scan result as well to come through, just to solidify my cancer freedom. After my treatment, the next day, I got a call from the oncologist's office that told me that my cancer had spread. From my neck to my chest, my lower back, my bladder, and my abdomen. So I'm holding the phone and I'm writing information down as to everything that's going to happen next. So what does this mean? What do we have to do now? It turns out that the lymph nodes that were swollen around my kidneys, they were so large that I wasn't able to use the bathroom properly. So I would have to have stents put in my bladder at that time. 2 metal stents were put in my back so that it would separate my kidneys from the lymph nodes. And I would then start another cycle of chemo. This one would be once every 17 days for 3 days straight, 5 hours each day. And this is when the real sickness started to hit in. This is when I started to get pretty down. Okay. And so we went through that, and my oncologist let me know that at this point I would be transferred to the blood and marrow transplant group of Georgia, because I would need to have a transplant. I would now need to have a transplant in order for my cancer to be relinquished. I then met with my doctor at Blood and Marrow, who actually went to college with my oncologist, so I felt pretty safe there. I was like, okay, you're sending me to your homeboy. I know y'all keep it in the family. That's nice. And I went to go meet with him, and we talked about how my stents had to be removed before I would start my transplant process. And This is now July, August, September, October. This is now November of 2014. We began my stents are removed, and my treatment is done at Piedmont, where I was getting my my chemo, and they got my cancer down to 99% gone. That was the number that they needed in order for me to be qualified for transplant. So I'm now getting prepped for the transplant process, which would be what is called an autologous transplant. And what that means is they will remove my stem cells from my body. They'll kill my body with chemotherapy, and then they'll put my stem cells back in, and they'll grow a new immune system. So I would start the process for that, and the day that I was having my stem cells extracted, I had a lymph node in the back of my head that rose.
Okay. So what we're going to do at this point, because the details that you're providing of your story is really shedding light as to why you had to decide
Yes.
that you had to repurpose your trauma.
Yes.
Because there was nothing about what the doctors told you initially that would have prepared you to go beyond the 6 treatments that was initially told to you. Nothing that you had read about or nothing that you had experienced with your friend, your best friend, that would say that you should be undergoing this or it should be taking this long.
Right.
So what we're going to do is we're just going to conclude this segment and go into another segment where you will be able to continue to tell your story.
Okay.
And for those of you who are watching Surviving Change, and some of you may not have thought that when you hear about people surviving cancer, and very rarely, unless you're there as a support person with that individual, do you have the option of knowing exactly what that individual is going through. So when we go to our next segment with April Bird, I just want you to take a moment to make sure that you are listening not just to her story of repurposing trauma, but why this particular trauma could be something that would totally turn your world upside down. Would you be able to, in this situation? I know for me, if I get a paper cut, it's like, oh my God, how do I repurpose this? I can't write with my hand, but no, we're not talking about that. We're talking about an individual who had a plan, knew how to repurpose, chose to repurpose, and then it was like, oh really? You gonna repurpose this? So before you tune in to the next episode, I want you to just take the time to look at your purpose. Are you on track? And if you're not on track, what have you caused to get in the way of you being on track? And until you do that, will the rest of this story be as profound for you as it has been for me? Because we know, and it's been told, that changes are going to happen. If you're not sure of what your purpose is, then those changes will knock you out. But that's not what happened to April Bird, and that's not what we want to happen to you. So tune in the next time. We'll continue our conversation with April Bird, and thank you for watching Surviving Change.